Welcome back to Gunman Ballistic. For most folks, when you think cop work, you picture traffic tickets, neighborhood watch, maybe a drunk driver getting hauled in, but every so often, things go from routine to life or death in a heartbeat. That's exactly what we're talking about today, the most dangerous and bloody shootouts in American law enforcement history. And believe me, Hollywood can't touch the real thing. Sure, movie gunfights have gotten slick over the last couple of decades, but they can't match the unpredictability, the chaos, and the sheer gut-punch reality that some officers have faced. We're diving into these cases not just for the action, but to understand how they unfolded and why they ended the way they did. And as we go, we're tipping our hats to the men and women who didn't make it home. Those fallen officers remind us just how steep the price of protecting the public can be. So let's lock in and start the countdown. Number 5. 1993. Waco Siege. In the spring of 1993, the quiet little town of Axtell, Texas, became ground zero for one of the most infamous standoffs in U.S. history. You've probably heard the name, the Branch Davidians. This was a religious sect led by David Koresh, and word started floating around that they were sitting on a massive private armory, not just a couple of hunting rifles in the safe. We're talking somewhere around 250 firearms. Everything from semi-IA rifles to actual grenades. Sounds like something out of a war movie, right? On February 28th, the ATF rolled in with roughly 80 armed agents, their mission to arrest Koresh and search the 77-acre compound. As with most high-stakes encounters, the two sides tell two completely different stories. Federal agents say the Davidians opened fire first. Survivors from inside swear the ATF was the one to pull the trigger. Either way, by the time the shooting stopped that day, 10 people were dead. Instead of ending there, it kicked off a 51-day standoff. Negotiators worked the phones day and night. The FBI managed to get 44 people to walk out unharmed, and Koresh himself spent over 60 hours on the line, spread across more than 2,000 calls. But he kept dodging the subject of surrender. Then came April 19th. The FBI moved armored vehicles in close and began pumping tear gas inside. Minutes later, flames ripped through the buildings. By the time the fire died, 75 people, including Koresh, were gone. Among the dead were children, and the exact cause of some of the deaths remains controversial to this day. One surviving Davidian even claimed some inside chose to end their own lives rather than burn alive. Number 4. 1970 Newhall Incident. Back in 1970, a quiet California town named Newhall saw a tragedy that would change American police training forever. On the night of April 6th, two young California Highway Patrol officers, Walter Frago and Roger Gore, spotted a car matching the description from a man with a gun call. They tailed it, called for backup, and moved in for what they thought was a standard stop. The driver pulled over. Officer Gore approached the vehicle, and before he could react, the passenger door flew open and a man named Jack Twining came out firing. Frago went down instantly. Twining didn't hesitate. He turned his gun on Gore and dropped him too. The driver, Bobby Davis, joined in, making the situation twice as deadly. Backup arrived officers James Pence and George Allen, but by then, the scene was a nightmare. With rounds flying and no visibility on their fallen partners, both Pence and Allen fought back hard but were killed in the exchange. Twining and Davis fled, sparking a 9-hour manhunt. Twining holed up in a house, briefly taking a hostage. When police surrounded him and filled the place with tear gas, he chose suicide with a stolen shotgun over surrender. Davis was caught alive, convicted, and sentenced to death, but in 1972, California tossed out the death penalty. His sentence was reduced to life without parole, and he spent the rest of his days in places like Folsom, Pelican Bay, and finally Kern Valley State Prison, where he died in 2009. Number 3. The 1974 standoff. Man, the 70s were a whole different animal. If you've ever cracked open a history book or hung around old-school law enforcement guys, you've probably heard about the Symbionese Liberation Army, the same crew that grabbed Patty Hearst right out from her cushy life. Jump to May 17, 1974, and we had a gun battle in Los Angeles that could have been scripted for the big screen. Only this one was 100% real steel and lead. Here's how it went down. The day before the shooting started, a couple SLA members tried to swipe ammunition from a shop and almost got pinched. Their getaway van got made, which led police right to one of their safe houses. Then the LAPD gets an anonymous call about some guys holed up with serious firepower. Next thing you know, over 400 cops, the FBI, LA, county sheriffs, the California Highway Patrol, and even the fire department had the neighborhood locked tighter than a drum. Negotiations? Forget it. SWAT tossed in tear gas, and the SLA answered with hot lead. You had LAPD running AR-15s, the SLA working modified M1 carbines, plus homemade grenades for extra mayhem. 2 hours into this slugfest, the building catches fire, likely from a hot tear gas round igniting something inside. Out of the smoke, 3 women dash for safety, and get this, none of them were even SLA. One was just some poor soul who partied too hard, passed out there, and woke up in a war zone. Then came the real chaos. Nancy Ling Perry and Camilla Hall charged out firing. Police claimed Hall pointed a weapon and went down immediately. Perry caught a double tap, and another SLA member dragged Hall's body back into the burning house. By the time the flames died and the smoke cleared, the SLA leader Donald DeFreeze had put a round in himself, and the rest were dead from either bullets, fire, or smoke. The cops pulled 19 guns from the rubble. The total lead exchange? Roughly 9,000 rounds. And here's the kicker, every casualty was on the SLA side. Not a single cop, firefighter, or civilian took a fatal hit. To this day, it's remembered as one of the most lopsided and massive gunfights in U.S. history. Number 2. The 1997 North Hollywood Shootout. February 28, 1997. Bright LA morning in North Hollywood, but this wasn't any Hollywood action set. This was real life, high-caliber chaos. 2 bank robbers, Larry Phillips Jr. and Emil Matasarianu, rolled up to the Bank of America branch, kitted out like they were walking into Fallujah, not a heist. 9:16 a.m. They step out with cash in hand, and LAPD's waiting. These guys didn't drop the bags, they started slinging lead. The total? Close to 2,000 rounds traded. Here's why this one's legendary. While most street cops back then were carrying 9mm semi-autos or 38 special wheel guns, these 2 were rocking Chinese-made AK-47s, a Bushmaster .223 with a 100-round drum, a Heckler & Koch HK-91 in 7.62 NATO, and a Beretta 92 FS. And they weren't just armored, they were wrapped head to toe in homemade plates that laughed off standard police ammo. SWAT eventually rolled in with heavier firepower, but even then, it was tough breaking through. The final act, Phillips, hit and nearly dry on ammo, turned his gun on himself. Matasarianu tried to boost a pickup after cops shredded his car tires, but officers lit up his legs. He bled out before medics could get him stable. The whole ordeal shifted police thinking nationwide. About 1,100 rounds came from the suspects, and cops fired back around 650. For a city famous for staged gunfights, that day was the real deal, and it permanently changed how law enforcement gears up. Number 1. The 1986 Miami-Dade Massacre. Now we roll back to April 1986. Miami-Dade, Florida palm trees, neon, and what would become the deadliest shootout in modern American law enforcement history. The players? William Matix and Michael Lee Platt, two guys who moved down under the pretense of starting a landscaping business but really lived for horsepower and high-powered rifles. They'd been linked to a string of violent robberies, and on this particular morning, FBI agents including Benjamin Grogan and Jerry Dove were shadowing them. When the suspects suddenly veered off and pulled in behind a farm store's drive-thru, Special Agent Richard Manouzi tried to pin them in. That's when the whole scene detonated. 3 FBI cars rammed their ride. Instead of dropping their weapons, Matix and Platt unloaded. We're talking multiple agents down, bullets ripping through sheet metal, pure close-range hell. Through it all, Agent Edmundo Mireles hit himself fought back, first with a 12-gauge, then a 357 Magnum revolver, and dropped both suspects in a display of sheer grit. When it ended, 2 FBI agents were dead, 5 more wounded, and only 1 walked away untouched. The firefight exposed a massive gap in firepower. FBI pistols and revolvers just didn't match up against rifles in the wrong hands. That led to the adoption of the 10mm auto as the new service caliber, eventually spawning the E40 Smith & Wesson, the 357 SIG, and the 9x25 Dillon. This wasn't just another page in the Bureau's history, it was a turning point in how American law enforcement armed itself.